Hello and welcome to my lecture about relational databases. My name is Charles Severance, and this lecture, audio, video, and slides are copyright Creative Commons attribution. So relational databases are amazing things. Our learning management system here at the University of Michigan using Sakai has billions of records, and you go try to log in, and within a tenth of a second you're logged in, and it has to go through billions of bytes of data in that tenth of a second. Or if you look at Facebook, it's trillions and trillions and trillions of amounts of data just to show you what your latest status update was. And what databases do for us is they allow us to speed through all that data, discarding and getting down to the one little status update that's your status update that just happened 3 seconds ago. It's billions and billions of bytes of data. And there are many ways to speed that up, but relational databases for the past 30 years have been the mechanism to take very, very large amounts of data and drill down very quickly to the exact bit that you need. It came from the 1970s just as a way to make computers better for interactive processes. Before then, they sort of did batch processes where they read and wrote and read and they couldn't randomly move around and look at their data. But as we built disk drives that allowed random access, we wanted to optimize that random access and make our ability to pass through lots of data very fast without reading all of it on the way by. And so there's a lot of mathematics that underlie relational databases, and you can look at database normalization and third normal form and things like that. We're going to keep our life a little bit simple. Just understand that it's amazing. The stuff that we do with relational databases is amazing. Because of the math background that we have in a relational database, there are two sets of terms that you will tend to see used, and in different situations or different classes will tend to specialize in these terms. The more common terms are database, table, row, and column, because that's kind of what they look like. But those who are more interested in the theoretical aspects of this will call them relations, tuples, and attributes. And so just understand that just because you switch and look at some different document, you start talking about attributes, like, whoa, I'm confused. No, you're not. It's a column. The essence of the math is that data sort of is at this intersection of an attribute and a tuple. A relation is the connection between those two things. And it's not something that matters too much to us, but it is the thing that makes these mathematically powerful, and the speed really comes from that underlying mathematical elegance. So for those of us who are going to think of it in a less math-oriented environment, we can think of it as sort of like a super awesome spreadsheet, right? So this is kind of like our database. And then these things down here, tracks, albums, and genres and artists, they're like tables. And then we have columns and we have rows. Probably the one thing that's a little different, although we do it commonly, is their databases certainly understand the type of data in each column. And so, something about this first row is telling us what kind of thing and what the name of that column is. In databases, this gets more explicit. And if you would do something like, say, this row is formatted as an integer, databases would get very explicit about that. But if we just sort of back off, we can see that it's a pretty simple concept to think of columns, rows, and tables and a database. Okay? So when you start building one of these applications, something like a PHP application, we finally start talking in the next chapter about PHP. We really often think of the database kind of running one place, the database application, and this is the application that takes the request and response from our user, much like we've been doing, and we, the developer, will write that code, right? We type in some new PHP, and when we get to it, we'll send queries to a database. The database is like a separate process, could be on a separate server. This might actually be a network connection between here. And we send this language across. We ask for data, send a query across in the language SQL, and then we get a chunk of data back and forth, and then we format that and show it to the end user. And so that's how it works, is the developer writes application that some of the things the application does is makes database queries, other things does, formats output and does various other things, right? So But we're not going to do we're not going to do this part. Well, we're not going to do this part until the next chapter. Okay? What we're going to do in this chapter is we're going to function more like a database administrator. And in organizations, it's often the case that developer and DBA are not the same person. But for this class, you are going to be both a developer and a DBA. This chapter is more of a DBA thing. And we're going to use a database tool, and we're going to pretty much type SQL directly to the database. So there is this database client. PHP-MyAdmin is probably the most common one that you'll use, but I'll show you also the command line a little bit. And we'll type SQL commands, and changes will happen. There's data in here and software and all kinds of really cool stuff in there. And so for this chapter, we are just working on this part of it, and we are a database administrator. We're doing things that in a production system, developers may not be able to do. And you might write code that might take weeks to go into production, and you have no access to the production database in a production environment. So the language we're about to learn is called SQL, or Structured Query Language. Some people, I think, have called it Simple Query Language in the past, but Structured Query Language. It is a beautiful language. It is a beautifully simple language. We're going to learn how to create data, read data, update data, and delete data in this language, and it's very elegant, and everyone really should know this. There's lots of database applications out there. Oracle is the large, very successful commercial one that they have like a sailboat. You know, there's a sailboat that goes flying by. Remember the sailboat, America's Cup sailboat? Oracle sponsors that, so they're a very, very successful company. MySQL is an open source. It's owned by Oracle, but we kind of trust it. There's another one called MariaDB, which is a clone of MySQL. It's not owned by Oracle. And then Microsoft has SQL Server, which is a very nice database. And people have favorites of these. They have their favorites. For this class, I just use MySQL because it's free and it's openly available. And it is very, very commonly used with PHP. And so we're just going to use that. There's lots of other ones that are popular out there. I've used all these: Hypersonic SQL, SQLite, and Postgres. But for this class, we're going to focus on MySQL. And so if you've installed one of these XAMPPs or MAMPs, somewhere on your screen, there is a place that you can start this thing called PHP-MyAdmin. If you are hosting your cPanel, there's going to be somewhere to click into PHP-MyAdmin. And so this, once you get in this PHP-MyAdmin, this is going to be common. This user interface, once you learn this, is going to be common across most systems that support PHP and MySQL. So learning how to use it and learning how to be good at it is a worthwhile exercise. So we can take a look at our databases. And let me show you the one I've got here. So I'm running MAMP on my Macintosh, and I can run, clear, click, and I can run PHP-MyAdmin. And so here I have that same screen. I can take a look at my databases. Now what's really happening is there's SQL going on back and forth, and we can type SQL commands here, etc., etc. Okay? And so there we go. That is one way of making use and talking to SQL. So if you're running in the command line, there's a couple of different commands depending on the operating system. You may not be able to cut and paste these depending, so you may have to type these by hand. So let me just show you the one that I have to run on my Macintosh for MAMP. It might take you a little while to figure out exactly which one. If you're on Linux, you're just going to type MySQL command at the command line, and the defaults will be fine. So let me just show you what I do on my Macintosh. I type this long thing. Now again, if you're having trouble cutting and pasting, just go ahead and carefully type that in. So it's going to log in as the root user and the root password. There's always security connected to these things. In our little development environments that we carry around on our desk, security is less critical. And so now we're at a MySQL prompt. And if we say show databases, we will see the various databases. And this looks the same as what we did in our PHP-MyAdmin. So I'll go back and forth for a couple of commands and show you sort of doing it both ways. But in general, I'll switch pretty much to PHP-MyAdmin. But if you're on Linux, you got to use this. Well, Not necessarily. On Linux, you might be using a control panel that comes with like cpanel and MySQL admin. But I want you to be able to realize that these SQL commands can be typed in lots of different user interfaces, not just the ones that I'm using. So here are some examples of the stuff typed in, and you at this little MySQL prompt. And so, like I said, the first thing that you're going to do in PHP-MyAdmin, I went and looked at the databases, and in my MySQL command line, I did show databases. It's kind of like hello world for databases. Okay, and so there's some databases that you should leave alone. Be careful, don't go dropping those databases. A database is a collection of tables, and so the command to create a database, and then the command line, you got to tell it which database you're using. In PHP-MyAdmin, you tend to navigate. So I'm going to create the database called people in a command line, and I'm going to use it. So I'm going to say create people. And I'm going to say use people. And then I am going to show tables. What tables are in there? There are no tables. But now if I switch for a moment to my MySQL admin and I hit refresh, you'll see my people database showed up there. That means the command line is talking to the database server, and my PHP-MyAdmin is talking to the database server. So if I go into people, I can see that there are no tables. There's no tables. I can create a table if I want. There's SQL, yeah, and away we go. And this is the equivalent of use, as I'm now in this database. So the SQL queries are going to be sent to that database. Okay, so that's just showing you the sort of equivalence between PHP-MyAdmin and the command line. And so here we go. This is what it looks like. So now we're going to do a create table. I'm going to do this create table. Create tables user. I'm going to do that one in PHP-MyAdmin, and I'm selected in the database people. Oops, forgot the C. Create table users. You got a column called name, which is a variable length character up to 128, and a column email that's variable length character up to 128. You'll notice I have a comma here and no comma there, and I say go. So this is going to submit the SQL to a database. And now you see I've got a users table, and I can look at the structure. I've got these columns, and it's the type, and all this stuff is starting to work, right? I can look at this table, and there's no data in it. I can go into my command line, and the describe command is the way that you look for things in the command line. Okay, so I now have a table and a database, and I know what's in it. It's got two columns. So it's empty. There's actually some wizards that allow you to create this inside PHP-MyAdmin. And so the next SQL statement we're going to look at is called the insert statement. And the insert statement, so SQL keywords, insert into, are actually just SQL. SQL is a little more verbose to make it a little more readable. And values is a keyword. Users is the name of a table. Then you have two parenthesis lists. One is the name of the columns, and then one is the name of the values to put in each column, and there's a sort of one-to-one correspondence between the number of things you put in the values list and the number of things that you put in the columns list. Okay, so the insert statement inserts a row into the table. Okay, so I'm going to just copy this little guy. Oh, by the way, you may have downloaded my little cheat sheet to make it so it's easier to copy these back and forth. Hopefully it'll work fine if we copy back and forth from the PowerPoint. We won't get sort of strange characters. So this time I'm going to do it in this. So I'm in a table users, I'm in database people, and I'm going to type, insert into yada yada, and then I'm going to say go. And now if I took a look at the browse, you would see that I now have one row with this row has name and email. If I go back to SQL, I can grab the rest of these and put them in. I actually need to put a semicolon at the end of each one if I want to do them all at the same time. And now I can say go, and we'll go and run all those. Yay. It ran them separately, and so now I have 5 rows in my database table. Okay? So that's the insert statement. You don't have to have all the columns. There are rules about what columns need to be there and what columns don't need to be there. Oops, we're going the wrong way. We can do a delete, and again, delete from is the language reserved words, where is a reserved word, table, and then kind of a logical question. And this is a column where, so delete from users where email equals ted@umich.edu. Kind of easy, right? So let's copy that one in. Let's copy that in. Copy that. This time I will go into here. I'll put a semicolon at the end, and now I will go over here and I will rebrowse, and you'll see that Ted's now gone. So we have these two processes. One is this command line terminal, and the other is this PHP-MyAdmin, and they're really talking to the same database. There can be literally many of these connections from your online PHP application, from you as the database administrator, from you as database administrator at the command line. They can all be connected at the same time. I'll speed us up, not keep doing that over and over. So we delete it, it's gone. Update. The update has, again, update is the keyword, set is a keyword, where is a keyword. So update the table users, set the column name to the value, Charles, and then there's a where clause. You got to be careful. If you don't leave this where clause, it'll do it down every column. If you don't put the where clause on, it'll do every column. So I say update, set name. So here we're going to see this one here that's going to select that one. So I switch to the SQL tab and then hit go. And then I take a look, and indeed the name's been changed. So that's update. Retrieving records, this is kind of the reading of the information, is the select statement. And the generic one is select star from users. And this column here, this is all the columns that you want. Star means give me all the columns. Otherwise, you can list columns. And then there's a table. And then there's an optional where clause. So come back. So select star from users. I'll type this one in the command line. Select star from users, semicolon. That pulls all those things out. And if I do select star from users where email equals csev.umich.edu, you see that I got just that record that is the one I'm looking for. Okay. So the select pulls out selected things. You can sort, select star from users order by email, or select star from users order by name. Order by is a reserved word. Even though it seems like it's 2 words, it's 1 reserved word. Again, they're just trying to make it easy for us. So I can say select by email. So now it's ordered by the email column. Copy. Paste. Order by name. So that gives me the same stuff because the emails and the person's names are the same order, but you get the picture. You can order by, and you can order by multiple things. You can order in descending. There's all kinds of things you can do. Another sort of operator that's interesting, and there's tons of these, I'm just giving you the high level, is a like, and there's like a wildcard. So the percent sign E percent sign says, look, anything has an E anywhere in it. So I can go to, let me switch back to doing it this way. I can go in here and I can say select star from users where name like the letter E, somewhere in there, and then I type go. And then it runs, and so you can see I only got the 2 rows where the person's name has an E in it. So Caitlin and Sally do not have E's in them. Ooh. The limit clause. The limit clause is a great enhancement to performance. If you think about all kinds of user interfaces that say this is the 1 to 25 of 1,000, next, back, that's what's going on here, because if you retrieved all 100,000, that'd be very costly both for the database and the server. If you're only going to do show 25, use this limit clause, and you can start at the beginning or you can start like at 26 if you want. And so I can add this limit 2 that says the first two. Limit 1 says start at 0 base. Start at the second one and give me 2 more. So I'll just run this one. Select star from users, order by email, limit. That's starting with the second one and going to. So we'll just go and type that into SQL. So it sorted it and then went down. This is how it's in the middle of something. And so the limit the limit is a starting row and a count or just a count. You can ask for a count, and that's how when you're on one of these page things that says 1 to 25 of 10,000, because the database is actually very fast at being able to do this. So instead of selecting the actual information, we can ask for a count of a certain number of things. So let's just go in here. So I can count 4. There's 4 of them. And I could also do that. I'll leave that up to you with a cool where clause. That would give you 1 if it was going to do that. So at this point, it's like, this is the summary of what we've shown you. How to insert, how to delete, how to modify, and how to retrieve. I'm giving you a couple of choices with the retrieval, like a where clause, like a limit clause, ordering, etc. And at this point, you're kind of thinking like, wow, why does everybody make such a big deal about this? And you honestly are sort of right at that point. And so that is basically the basics of SQL. Of course, we haven't gone to multiple tables or foreign keys and stuff like that, but we'll get to that eventually. So, but this is why it's such a pretty language, because really at its core, these are the functions. And then we just sort of wrap this with increasing complexity. But these are the 4 basic things that relational databases are capable of doing.